Hi everyone, welcome to today's broadcast. In a time where freedom of speech is being oppressed and the democracy of the West and many countries are under attack and being weaponized against our own people, I think it's important for us to continue to have the key conversations in open platforms, in open places. And today's guest is a guest you do not want to miss. I'm sitting down speaking with Terry McMahon, somebody who's well recognized, somebody who's also come under a little bit of scrutiny and attack due to his own personal beliefs and some of the being vocal with everything that is going on across Ireland and across many nations in the West. Terry, welcome to today's broadcast. It's an absolute pleasure to have you here. First and foremost, how are you?
Good. As good as can be in this insanity.
Brilliant. For the guests that don't know you, right, if you want to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself, I think it's an opportunity for both of us to get to know each other as well a little bit more in this conversation.
Okay, I kind of hate that shit, but we'll do it. But let's do it in a fractured way, so we can reveal things about each other as we talk. I know of you, and I've watched some stuff, and I'm hugely excited to have a conversation. Yeah. But I'm also hugely excited about the unknown space and entering that unknown space.
Brilliant.
So we'll reveal things about each other, no doubt, as we talk. But instead of giving some bullshit CV or instead of giving some overview to your viewers, let's have a conversation about the things that you say that are being suppressed, the things that we are told we can't say.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, you know, from my perspective, right, I've grown up in this country since I was 8 years old. I moved here from Congo. My mother first came here and then we followed suit after. But what I was met with when I came to this country was a mix, right? It was more support and welcome, a little bit of animosity, a little bit of racism and things like that, which is normal. I think when you move to a different area, kids are going to be kids, and it was just bullying at the time. That's all it is. So I've dealt with that. But what I have seen and what's made me a little bit more vocal, I've seen people that have done a lot of good in the world, a lot of good for people, and welcome me, my family, and many other African people within this country attacked, right? But the attacks came primarily from the Irish themselves. It came from the government, it came from the media, and labeling this country as a racist country and this far-right narrative that kicked in, which I personally hate, right? Because the people that are being labeled far-right, when I've spoken to many of them and I've listened to what they've said, there's not much that they've said that I can look at and say, right, they're racist or it's a far-right sentiment. So the abuse of that word, those are the things that I believe have suppressed freedom of speech, because I've seen that word used more against people that were speaking the truth, people that were questioning things that weren't normal. Immigration being a big thing here, where people said, well, what's going on, right? This mass immigration is not good enough. It's destructive and it's destabilizing the culture of Ireland, many different places, and it's bringing about so many social issues. Instantly you were labeled as far right. Instantly you were labeled as somebody who is hateful, who, you know, and almost, I've seen even references of people referencing people of that nature towards like Hitler and Nazi and all of these things. So that weaponization for me didn't sit well, because I've grown up in this country. I've integrated far more than any other person, I believe. Maybe some more than me, but I've done a hell of a lot of integration and hanging around with different people. So I've gotten to know the people, not from a fake perspective, of a perspective without knowledge, without experience, right? Without real in-person experience with people. And so for me, it made me vocal. And then look, I think the thing that really tipped it over the iceberg for me was when the little girl was stabbed here in the city centre, right? And other people attacked at the school. That crossed the line, because all of the people that were being labelled as far right said something like this is going to happen. And guess what happened? It did. And then people sat back and it's like, oh, this, that, and the other. And I said, well, I'm not surprised. People were talking about this for a long time and you ignored them. Now look where we are. So that destabilization of this country really affected me, because it's a country and it's a people that are nothing of the sort that they've been labelled. So that's a little bit of where I come from. Right, and I think it's important for people to understand that when they ask me, why are you so protective of Irish people? Why are you always on the side of speaking for Irish people? Because there are people that have done nothing but open up their arms to people, and they've gotten nothing positive back, if I can say that. That's where I come from.
It's an incredible summation. And I know it'll get you in trouble.
Oh, yeah.
And I know... And I hate reducing anything to skin colour, because that's what they're doing all the time.
Absolutely.
All this reductionism. DEI, LGBTQ, trans, all this gender, skin colour, sexuality. Like, what's it got to do with anything? I have no idea. For me, the least interesting aspect of you is your fucking skin color.
Yeah.
Why we're discussing it, I don't understand. And yet, word for word, if somebody with a different skin color to you, I don't know what our skin color is. I think it's pink and purple and all kinds of shit in it. Yeah. But if somebody with my skin color said what you said, immediately I'm racist. Immediately I'm far right, which gives total credence to what you're saying.
Absolutely.
Now, in terms of the girl who had her throat slit outside her school, that was my children's school.
Right.
I know all the staff there. I know everything about that place. We were on the street coming down. I was coming out with my daughter, my two youngest daughters. I ended up having to bring them to a different school.
Wow.
So we were coming down the same street. Now, what happened there, to me, is fascinating in the sense that the story was immediately buried in obfuscation and accusations of racism. And suddenly, the people who responded the way they responded, which are mostly working class, and we know that the working class in this country are scum. They're the one group of people that you really can say anything you want about and do anything to, and nobody protects them. But when those people demonstrated, I don't call it a riot, they demonstrated, they protested. Yeah. They protested the same way as the people who protested the killing of George Floyd protested.
Absolutely.
But the people who protested the killing of George Floyd, who stood giving black power salutes on O'Connell Street during lockdown, while our elderly were left dying alone in old folks' homes, those people were heroes. And the kids who demonstrated on O'Connell Street were scumbags. And you know how I know they were scumbags? Because our Minister for Justice labelled them as such. Our Minister for Justice at the time, Helen McMahon, called them scumbags. So just for a second, but those people there who demonstrated, who responded, who protested, every single one of them that were arrested and charged and found guilty had their names, addresses and pictures printed in the media.
Absolutely, yeah.
Meanwhile, we still had no idea who the hell had done the cutting of the child's throat. That's the imbalance. That's disgusting beyond belief. And we as a nation, not only are we not racist, yes, there are some people in Ireland who are probably racist. They're fucking morons.
Of course.
There's morons everywhere.
Yeah.
But in general, as a society, not only are we not racist, we kind of delight, we're thrilled by that which is foreign.
Absolutely.
Because we're so parochial. Even when we were kids, anything that was foreign was incredibly exciting to us. From food to people to intimacy to anything. Yeah. And for suddenly a government to use terms like fascist, far right. Fascism is an instrument of the state and corporate combined to remove the capacity of the individual to dissent. That's actual fascism. That's the literal meaning of it. Yeah. We fascists in government accusing powerless people of being fascists.
And why is that, right? So my question is this, and this is the conversation that many people are not having, which they should. Why would a government turn on its own people? Why would a government use tactics like that to label its own people as racist and far right? We seen it just yesterday. One of the Donegal senators coming out and saying she's afraid to be at the protest because it was hijacked by the far right. Now, I was at the protests. I took a gang of other African people to the protest, and there was nothing of the sort. In fact, they felt safer at the protests than they've ever felt anywhere else. They got love, reception, all of that. Why is that tactic being deployed against the Irish people?
Well, let's deconstruct that in terms of simple, and I don't mean this personally against anybody, particularly somebody who evidently has intellectual issues. That senator was put in that position as a consequence of DEI. Okay. Hand-chosen by Micheál Martin. Now, she's a traveller. And again, I hate reductionist labels, but she's a traveller. And as a traveller, she represents her people. And what effect do you think she has on the larger, broader perception of travellers?
Very negative.
Horribly
very negative.
The damage done by her and her appointment alone is incalculable. Yeah. You think that's accidental?
No, it's strategic, intentional.
Of course it's strategic, yeah. So across the board, why would a government turn on its people? Firstly, you got to ask, who are the people they're turning on? Yeah. And the people they're turning on are a certain class of people. The working class.
The working class people.
They're not turning on the electorate. Yeah. They're not turning on their cozy little cartel of protectionists who are making a fortune out of IPAS centres, who are making a fortune out of migration. A fortune beyond belief.
Absolutely.
So you have someone like our ex-leader, a half-Indian gay man who became leader of this country.
Should have never happened.
No, I don't mind it happening. But he insisted we were homophobic. He insisted we were racist. Yeah. You're a fucking half Indian gay man who's the leader of a country. How the fuck are we homophobic? How the fuck are we racist?
In the position that you've got in it.
Just look at the simple facts and you go, now where is he? Yeah. He's in Harvard. He's, again, getting groomed to become something else. But this was a guy who clung onto power with everything he had on every level. And overnight, he walked away. Why? Also, there's no consequence. So when you betray your people, which is treason, and should be treated accordingly.
Absolutely.
When you betray your people in this country, you swan off into 2 or 3 large payments of salary for the rest of your life. And you go into the private sector. And you have the keys to the kingdom and the secrets to a nation. And what do the people do? Bye. Nothing. Zero consequence. So why wouldn't you betray your people? Our entire government system, our entire corrupt government system is predicated on the notion that each individual within that structure, once they acquiesce and prove their capacity to betray their nation to their masters, they will be given the rewards later. And they will swan off into the sunset with no consequence.
Yeah. You raised a good point, right? And this is something that I said. And I think with DEI, you mentioned DEI, and I think this is the problem, and people have to understand it. When I speak on my platform, and I'm speaking to African people especially, right, and I say, we have to be grateful for the opportunities you've been given in this land, and understand to speak not from a position of entitlement, because there's a lot of entitlement. I think this is what the likes of DEI and things like that has done. It's entitled people to consistently demand more instead of giving back. I posted a message recently towards the African community and saying, right, you should come out and stand in solidarity. Now, you've got a mix of feedback, a lot of positive, but there's also the negative side of it, and it comes from a spirit of entitlement that all of these things has enabled upon people. That somebody who's not of this land can come to this land and demand of you, demand of your government to give them more without them contributing back to the same effect of what they're demanding. And that's a problem. It falls back on the government. But I would also say, what are the solutions to this from your perspective? Right? How do people wake up from this slumber, from this state of sleeping? Because one thing I found, and I said it before, the reason Ireland got to this position is because a lot of the men and women of this nation sat back. They thought somebody else is going to fix it. Maybe it's not too big of a deal. And all of a sudden now we're in the position where we're in. And a lot of damage has been done, where people sat back when it was time to actually stand up properly. We've seen the farmers come out and protest, but why hasn't that been done for all of the other issues that have been ongoing so far? Why now, and what can people do to change it from your perspective?
Well, it's a great question. In terms of, again, like DEI, for example, we inherited that notion from America. In the same way as we inherited George Floyd from America.
Yes.
Now, again, what happened to George Floyd was appalling. But he was a recidivist criminal who did appalling things. And suddenly he has a white horse-drawn carriage pull his coffin. You're looking at it going, what are the optics here? What is it that we're telling young men and young women?
Absolutely.
So DEI, the first thing it does, diversity, equity, and inclusion. The first thing it does is it defines you by your skin color.
Yeah.
Defines you. Defines you means it reduces you.
The entire process is racist within itself.
Of course, absolutely, rapidly racist.
Absolutely, yeah.
But presented as anti-racist. This is the comedy of it. The paradox, but also the cynicism of it. In terms of how we address these issues, I'll give you an example. And it's only because you mentioned the African community here. And again, I've been to Africa multiple times. I've worked in Africa. I made a movie in Africa. So I'm being called racist by people who never left fucking D4. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. But when you look at it, you go, we have a population in Ireland of Africans that is less than the population of Indians, Asians, Polish. Now those three just straight away, okay? Why are Africans represented on television and cinema on every level? Why are they in every advertisement in every store in the city and the towns? Why? When they, in terms of representation, they are given massive 50%, sometimes 60% representation in our media. And in actuality, they represent less than 1.5% of the culture. When you look at that, you go, there's something much more going on there. This is not the fault of Africans. This is not the fault of someone who was born accidentally of a certain skin color in a certain city. This is a policy that's been implemented. And unfortunately, those policies came from universities. The universities, out of some sense of shame or guilt or whatever the hell you want to call it, they are implementing a series of policies that are doing unbelievable damage to our culture.
Absolutely.
And more importantly, terrible damage to Africans.
Absolutely.
Not to Chinese, curiously enough, who represent much higher numbers. Not to the Indians, who represent much higher, the Asians, who represent much higher, but they're actually doing terrible damage to Africans, because young African men, particularly men, and young African women, are being indoctrinated into thinking that they're victims. That they're born to be victims.
Yes.
And that professional victimhood is incredibly exciting. It's seductive. It's enticing. Because it makes you believe not only are you entitled to something, but you're kind of heroic in demanding it. And suddenly we have, again, this nonsense of a narrative being created for young, vulnerable, excited, curious African men and women. And they're going to jump on board. In the same way as any of these movements, the trans movement, the LGBTQ movement, the gender movement, all of these movements that create division and that define, therefore reduce you, are going to do incredible long-term damage to you.
Well, it's never in the best interest of the people that they say or they claim they're supporting. I've had this conversation with a lot of people within my community, and I've said one thing about it, right? This victim mentality that it's embedding in people makes an individual weak. It prevents you from succeeding across every single aspect of your life, and you adopt an identity that wasn't yours. Somebody mentioned it to me a couple of weeks ago, and the nature of the conversation was, how are you supporting Irish people and white people when everything that we have been through with slavery was caused by white people? And, you know, one of the things I said, you're adopting a pain that doesn't belong to us. I said, there's nobody in my family that I know directly, in my lineage, within my ancestors, that were slaves. What happened in America has nothing to do with my family in Congo. The bloodline, my grandparents, my great-grandparents, none of them were slaves. What if the identity of my family was that we were meant to be kings and royalty? And I'm adopting a new identity that doesn't belong to me. So spiritually, you're denying your own personal purpose. I think the ripple effect goes deeper, right? You're taking on an identity that wasn't yours. You've a new history that has nothing to do with the purpose by which you were created here for, and nothing to do with your family lineage. I don't know if all of those slaveries, I don't know what their ancestors may have been. They could have been evil people. They could have worshipped God knows what. And I'm taking on that identity. Why? Because of collective suffering, because what the media is using to play on fear and pain of people. But the reality is, even the true history of slavery, many African people don't know, because you're blinded by all this DEI, the promotion of people that are, you know, coming out with victim statements. And right now, if I went online and started talking about I've experienced racism and white people are racist, etc., I'd get a lot of support. I'd get a lot of sympathy and people saying, me too, I've also been through that. But it's weakening to an individual. And I understand it from a success level. You cannot succeed with that mentality. Every individual will have obstacles, right? You, as a white man, you've had plenty of obstacles in your life on your path to success.
No, as a white man, I've been handed everything.
But you've had a lot of obstacles, right? And a lot of opposition in many different ways. But you had an attitude and a spirit of persevering and overcoming all of your challenges. Each person has that. You may think it's your skin color, whatever it is. For you to succeed, you have to look at it from a position of it's just another challenge. And if you take on that label, it weakens you and it prevents you from moving forward. And there's many people that are being prevented. And when you're having these arguments with people, it's quite easy, because if we think logically, you win those arguments. But unfortunately, many of the people on the left side don't think logically. And I had somebody knock at my door, right? An individual who was selling mobile internet. And he said, oh, I recognize you from your social media platform. I said, cool. And he said, no, some of the things you say, I don't know. I said, what don't you agree on? He said, I don't agree with why you support the Irish so much. And I said, right, well, I'm not going to buy what you're selling. But if you have time, come in, we'll have a coffee. And he came in, a Nigerian man. And we had a conversation. And to cut a long story short, he mentioned systematic racism. I said, that's the reason why he can't move ahead in his job. I said, really? I said, well, let's look at it. Why can't you move ahead? Oh, well, look, I've been working for this company for X amount of times, and you know, if I wanted to go for a senior position, I can't. I said, is there a senior manager there? Yes, there is. So how are you going to get his position when he's been there already? Why don't you go to another company that's promoting a senior position? And I said, at the age of 24, I was a senior manager in an all-white company where I'm the only black person. Because at a higher level, it's about competence. Yeah. And this idea of systematic racism is giving you an excuse to not evolve, not move forward, not become competent and become stronger. Because at the higher tables, all it is about what value you provide. And if you provide value, then you're worth it, right? But all of this narratives makes an individual become a victim and constantly make excuses for why they're not succeeding, but ultimately it's down to yourself. And it's damaging to any community, I believe, because any individual that embodies that victim mentality, you will not succeed. And there's evidence. When you speak to the most successful black people, they don't have that same mentality. They do not abide by that. And so what I came to realize is success has its clues, failure has its clues. And they're giving you all of the tips and tricks to be a failure, not to be a success. And it's weakening us in ways that we can't possibly imagine. And I want to put a question to yourself. Obviously, you've received some backlash on the back of being vocal, the event in which you gave a speech over in the UK with the likes of Tommy Robinson. Can you give me a little bit of insight on that and explain to our viewers what that's been like for yourself in that process?
Well, I was asked to speak in London. It was the biggest rally in the history of Britain.
Yeah.
And I was asked to speak at it, and I was very nervous, very hesitant. In fact, said no a few times. And again, it's back to the thing where you realize you're saying no because you're afraid.
What were you afraid of?
The backlash.
Okay.
The inevitable backlash. We have this certain perception of people, again, like I said in the speech, they tell us who to hate and then teach us on how to hate them. So there are certain people who have been held up as poster children for extremism, far-rightism, fascism, Nazism, racism, whatever you want to call it. Now, I knew that wasn't true, but truth is secondary these days.
Absolutely.
To perception. So it's like you talk about, for example, slavery.
Yeah.
The idea that whites took blacks as slaves and that's all the story is nonsense.
Absolutely.
Absolute nonsense.
Yeah.
And anybody who can read a sentence knows that. But we insist that that being the narrative. In the same way as in England, a working class, he's half Irish, Stephen is, but a working class, half Irish man who went out of his way on every level, including putting his own life on the line to expose the rape and torture of hundreds of thousands of young working class girls because of their class and because of their skin color. When that's not heroism and that's seen as hatred and seen as racism and seen as Nazism, we have a serious problem with understanding decency and humanity. So I agreed to do it, was terrified doing it, and I realized, okay, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to have to do something that's unprecedented.
Right.
So hidden inside my jacket, I had an Irish tricolour with the proclamation printed on it.
Brilliant.
And this was outside Downing Street to the largest march in the history of Britain. And I unfurled that flag. And the guy I was with went, oh shit, we're dead. He actually went, we're dead. We're going to get killed.
Okay.
He's going to get dragged off the stage.
Yeah.
And instead, like anything that requires a bit of courage, we talked about courage earlier, you should be terrified to do it, and at the same time, you should insist on doing it despite the terror. The effect was extraordinary. Now, it was seen again, Elon Musk was one of the speakers as well. And Jordan Peterson was supposed to be one of the speakers, but he was ill. And there was some people there that I agree with, some people I totally disagree with.
Okay.
But if we only agree to share a platform with people we agree with, we end up in the tiny little bubble that we're in now.
Absolutely, yeah.
So I'm prepared to have conversations with people that I might not understand at all.
Well, in the time that we're living in, right, when you have this type of suppression of people expressing their opinions, we're not living in a democracy, are we?
Well, see, this is I'm curious even about the term democracy. We have deified democracy as if it's some sacrosanct, untouchable miracle. When in actuality, the pragmatic requirements of democracy need to have the machine moving every day for each of those parts to click into place. And what's happened is we've allowed liars and frauds and psychopaths to remove those parts and claim that they're still representing democracy, when, like we said earlier, our government is infinitely closer to fascism than the people they're accusing of being fascists.
Absolutely.
They hold the wheel of power. So democracy, while I love it and while I think it's the best idea or concept or political philosophy out there, I don't genuflect in front of it in the belief that it is untouchable or that it is somehow a superhero, because in actuality it's fragile beyond belief. We are getting closer every day to civil war. We have a government that's dragging us in that direction. We have people who are divided on multiple levels. We have a migration policy that makes no sense to anybody, including the migrants who have been brought in. So again, there are people watching this. I keep on saying this before, but there are people watching this now who are hearing things we're not saying, seeing things we're not doing, and remembering things that never happened in front of their eyes. I don't know how to talk to those people. I don't know how to communicate on any level to somebody who insists that their worldview and their perception, like when we talk about a sense of self, back to the idea of skin color or sexuality or class or whatever. Class is the one thing that's never discussed. We have children who are starving, literally children who are starving in Ireland, and they're being totally ignored. Homeless children being totally ignored. Meanwhile, we have a rabid LGBTQ rainbow trans policy being force-fed into our schools.
And hundreds of thousands, millions of funding behind such things. Yeah.
What's the thinking behind it? What is it that they're trying to create? So the larger question for me in terms of why I spoke in England, why I gave the speech that I gave, I said, for example, we have a common enemy.
Yeah.
And people are, oh, who's the common enemy? And again, you're going, you fucking moron. Immediately trying to find some division, some wedge. When in actuality, I think that the working class of Ireland, Scotland, Wales, and England, and Ireland combined have far more in common.
Absolutely.
Than we have with those people in power.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yet they want to keep the old divisions. Now, as a consequence of it, I'm accustomed to being attacked. I've lectured in all the major universities in Ireland. My contracts were stopped overnight.
Right.
I was developing a film for the last 10 years. It was ready to go ahead, and the lead actor, quite a famous lead actor who I really loved, walked from the project. Producer walked from the project. Funding collapsed overnight. I've lost work countless times. I've been in situations where, again, we were talking about it earlier, I give classes, and I had people demonstrate outside the building. I had them contact the building demanding that I be removed from the building, not allowed to be used. I've had my tires slashed. I've had people create fake accounts from my son and myself where we're out looking for underage men for sex.
Wow.
Pictures of me and my son.
Yeah.
I've had my children attacked. I've had my home attacked. I had posters for movies that I made ripped down off walls. I've been followed by a couple of hard men from Antifa.
Right.
They weren't too fucking hard when I turned around and went back toward them. But these are people who believe that what they're doing is somehow noble. And in actuality, what it's doing is feeding entirely into a government narrative.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I think that we exist in a realm where, despite everything, I have a profound belief in Ireland. And I'm talking about the new Ireland. I'm talking about including people like yourself.
Yeah.
But back to the idea of what we talked about, professional victimhood. There's also, we forget that professional victimhood is incredibly attractive because it allows you to negate responsibility for everything.
Absolutely.
So when you can turn in on yourself and sit there with your head in your chest and you go, the whole world hates me and I can't do anything about it because I'm a victim.
Yeah.
And somebody says, you're right, you are a victim. Here's a little bit of money and here's a little bit of prestige and here's a little platform.
Yeah.
It's very, very hard to turn your back on that once it becomes part of who you are and how you behave.
Absolutely.
And there's a massive swathe of the left, to use that reductionist term, who are utterly addicted to the power that they are given by demanding victim status. They get paid for it.
Yeah.
They get paid a lot of money for it. Again, it's interesting, we talked about it earlier, but the people who dissent, the people who question, not only do we not get paid for what we do, we get our payments removed. We get our jobs removed. We get our livelihoods cancelled. The people on the left, again, to use that reductionist term, which I hate, but not only do they have skin in the game, but it is imperative for them to continue the indoctrinated policies and the implementation of them because they have to pay their mortgage.
Of course.
They have to put food on their table. So they're getting paid to rabidly protect something that they know is a fucking evident lie.
But I genuinely think some of them don't know that it's a lie. And some of them are that delusional that they believe what they're fighting for is actually right. And that they're being inclusive and loving and all of these things and they're the good people. But it also comes back to me, and I've always said this, if you give a weak man power, you'll see abuse of power because they've never tasted that before. Yeah. And what all of these things have done, it has enabled people, Lord forgive me in the most respectful way that I can say, it has given people opportunities that were losers to all of a sudden become winners, right? But not by effort, not by, doing it the right way, but by simply playing into a narrative which is very much destructive. And you mentioned something, I think, you can't change those people. Those people follow trends, right? So the trend will shift. And I think the more people start having these type of conversations and breaking the narrative, the more they see a black man and an Irish man sit down and have this conversation, it changes things. And I've started to see a shift in narrative in a lot of people's mindsets because I get a lot more communication from different people, positive and negative. But the tide is starting to shift between different people of different communities, where many of them are messaging me and saying, you know what, you're actually right. And we agree with what you're saying. this is dangerous for us, this is dangerous for our community, and we need to change that. But it is that, and I said it, their shift has happened somewhere that the weakest people, the weakest aspect of humanity has managed to gain even more power than they could before. Ireland is learning how to manipulate media. I've seen a change. Ireland never knew how to manipulate media. That's one thing I'll say. On a lot of things, Ireland is still behind technology-wise. But somewhere they've gotten the education and the training on how to manipulate media, how to put out the right messages to influence the masses towards a direction that they want. And it's a very dark and destructive narrative that's being pushed. And it's a shame, and I say it, you know, and for yourself, obviously, you've lost business and all these things. I've spoken with many people whom relationships have been cut off between their families for speaking out against immigration. Just last week, I spoke to a friend of mine who said, my parents are about to throw me out if I speak more about politics, and I can't come to the protests that are there. And I say to the people and anybody who's watching, and I encourage them to share it to their family members, etc. And hopefully some of your ex-clients would see this, right? That's all well and good to be fearful. But how do you sleep at night knowing you have no spine? How do you sleep at night knowing that you had an opportunity to display courage and you chose weakness? And whether the world doesn't know it, you know it. And the beautiful thing about sin is we're not punished for our sins, we're punished by them. In a sense that you live that in your consciousness will never really give you peace. And so it is a time that people need to be courageous and stand up, right? Because the truth is now evolving and the truth is going to be shown. And when the tide turns, you're going to be somebody who's known as you were a coward. You bend the knee on things you shouldn't have bent the knee, and you should have stood up for the truth in what we know, because there's more innocent children being harmed as a consequence of people not standing up for the truth and supporting those that are saying the things that need to be said. And your entire nation is almost being hijacked, and that cannot happen. I had the conversation last night on an interview with somebody, and I said, the culture of Ireland, you can't get rid of that. Ireland holds a very sacred place in the world. Irish people are a very sacred people, as many other people are too, in their right place.
Yeah.
So the destruction and destabilization of Ireland is not in the best interest of anybody at all in the world. And I think it's time for more people to have courage, right? And those are the people that will go down in history.
Well, you said, how do you sleep at night knowing you've no spine? I know people who sleep incredibly well, spineless.
Yeah.
I also know people who are terrified and they can't sleep, but they can't find a way in to take action.
Yeah.
And those are the people that I think are the future. And if you look at what we're capable of becoming, I agree Ireland is a sacred nation. But if you look at what we're capable of becoming, as a nation of people, the world, last week during the truckers and farmers protests, the eyes of the world was on Ireland.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Something alchemical was taking place.
Yeah.
Something profound, something legacy defining was unfolding. Now, obviously, it was insane, the overreaction.
Yeah.
The idea of sending in the army against its own citizens. Yeah. Within 2 days, that decision was made. That is beyond comprehension. So something rattled the cages, big style. And it looks like Micheál Martin is going to be gone now.
Yeah.
But when you look at our Minister for Defence, it's the same woman who was the Minister for Justice who called protesters scumbags.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
She wasn't even told that they were invoking the army, which is incredible. So again, you're looking at a chain of command that's so fragile.
Absolutely.
But at the same time, we have people who, when you sit down and speak with them, like you said earlier, most people that you sit down and speak with are incredible people. Most of them.
Yeah.
I'm talking about a vast majority, not some percentage that's small, remarkable people. But we proved, and I hate to reduce it to this, because I think it's possibly a brilliant opportunity to examine the psyche of a nation.
Yeah.
And to evaluate and learn from it and make sure it doesn't happen again.
In what way?
And if you look at what we did during lockdown.
Yeah.
Now, it wasn't just that the government locked us down. It wasn't just that we have one of the longest lockdowns in the world. It wasn't just that they removed fundamental human rights that had been fought for fucking hundreds of years. Yeah. It wasn't just that we were, anybody who questioned the narrative or dissented or questioned the vaccine were literally thrown out of society and refused entry to the most basic rights in society. All of that was horrific. But what was most horrific was our willingness to betray each other.
Yeah.
Our willingness to pick up a phone, a hotline, and say, he's doing this, she's doing that, breaking 5K. And you're watching that and you're going, then we forget. And again, I know that you're a recent arrival in the larger narrative of Ireland, but all of our major narratives in this nation have been determined by betrayal. In the entire history of our nation, every single major narrative that has happened, the core element
is betrayal.
Betrayal.
Yeah.
So suddenly you're looking at it and you're going, when are we going to learn from that? And I think, again, perversely, or even paradoxically, I think we may have looked in the mirror during COVID. Now, I know people who still will double down and triple down.
Well, after COVID, I'd say people looked in the mirror. Not during, I don't think.
No, but I mean that during it, it was a certain thing. But afterwards now, I know people who have doubled down and tripled down still. But I also know other people who've asked me aside for a private conversation or sent a private message and say, I can't sleep at night. Now, they're not spineless. They're growing a fucking spine.
Yeah.
And they're growing a spine as a consequence of recognizing their cowardice.
Absolutely.
And their collective cowardice, their collective acquiescence. You're talking about taking a knee. We took a knee. Sinn Féin took a knee for George Floyd in Dublin. What the fuck has George Floyd got to do with Sinn Féin and nationalism? And us taking a knee? Do you know how insulting that is to black people?
Absolutely.
Take a fucking knee, but wash his feet.
Yeah.
But the reality of and this happened during lockdown, this happened during the whole narrative of COVID, where everything became inverted, everything became subverted. But I think my hope is, because I'm seeing sprouts of hope from it, is that people have finally recognized, and I think that sense of spirit was caught during the protests from the farmers and the truckers, that people have realized that we have fraudulent, lying psychopaths pretending to be our protectors. And they're destroying our future, destroying our children's future, and they need to be stopped.
Absolutely.
And the only people who can stop them is the person who's lying in bed, growing a new spine, afraid to know what to do tomorrow. You put enough of those together, nation can change.
No, this is my next question, because brilliant. And I think that is the solution, is for me, more people to unite and stand up and rise up to all of these things, right? Because there is mass formation. I think mass formation is a fantastic theory that is used, especially the media has used it and governments use it a lot. As you said, that's why you could divide people. Some people were following all of the narratives that the media was pushing about the vaccines, the fear-mongering around that, so created a mass formation that even if you weren't fully sure of it, you went because just the crowd was going in that direction, and most people did that. And it's beautiful to see now with what the farmers done. I think it was incredible, but they need to act on it, right? More actions needs to be taken following from that. Because if you don't, what will happen is the same vacuum will come back in again, where people don't know what to do, nothing is being done, and there's no action being taken. One thing I have found, and which really bothers me, is the division, right, within external politicals, right, those that are not a part of the main political parties, even the independent TDs, and new parties sort of being created in Ireland to try steer people together in the direction of saving Ireland. There's a lot of division between people. There's a lot of infighting. How do you break that division and gain that unity a little bit more? Because more forces need to be united. And I think the problem I've seen is everybody wants to be the one that says, I saved Ireland. No, we done it collectively. I've noticed that a lot of the people that I observe online and conversations going on, and people that are saying we stand for this, even all the other political parties, it's like, I want to be the person. I want to be the one recognized that I did it. Not we did it. It's that I mentality. And this is the biggest problem. There's not, we have to get into a position. I think Ireland needs to get into a position where people are moving collectively and understand our personal gains, our personal agendas, our personal ambitions has to be set aside for the bigger goal. Because until that is done, and I think maybe some people are underestimating what's at risk. It's the future, it's the generations, it's all of the things that you fear coming to reality if that is not done. And that's something that I'm struggling to to see people do, and to see people united for that cause.
Well, I think you're right on the money. But again, we gotta go back to the. Do you remember the Wall Street? Do you remember the protests against Wall Street? 1%. They recognized that was a powerful force. Maybe the biggest force since the civil rights marches in the 60s of real profound change. And they went, we need to do something here. So they did what they do brilliantly. They created distractions.
Yeah.
So now, again, back to LGBTQ, back to trans rights, back to defining people by their skin color, defining people by their gender, defining people by their sexuality. All of these categorizations, they suddenly become the emblematic, celebrated civil rights issue. And there's so many of them out there. And they're all bogus, they're all bullshit, they're all a fallacy.
Yeah.
But there's so many of them out there that people who are attracted to the idea of activism or attracted to the idea of doing something right with their lives, young people in particular, beautiful young people, are suddenly like a moth to a flame attracted to a lie.
Yeah.
Because the flame is a dark light. It's not real at all. But they were attracted to it and they become so enamored by it and seduced by it that they're willing to turn vicious.
Right.
In the name of righteousness. Now that, when you have enough of those little emblematic bullshit charades playing out, the vacuum that's left below is a large majority of people who have no idea where to direct their fucking intense dissatisfaction, their intense desire for change, because they're watching the circus parade march through it constantly. We have children. Children now are sexual objects to predators, and we're talking about this as a noble thing. So when you're somebody who wants societal change for the benefit of everybody, and you're told that the people who will benefit most are a bunch of degenerates who want to indoctrinate children, you start to question what it is that you're trying to do.
Yeah.
So those distractions are incredibly powerful. And they all came as a consequence of the bankers realizing we need something new here. So when we talk about, for example, media, Irish people are becoming media savvy. The problem is that simultaneously, particularly in terms of algorithms, the government are becoming equally savvy about how to manipulate and exploit.
Of course, yeah.
How to penetrate, how to trigger, how to do all this shit. So now even again, this conversation, there are people who won't give a fuck about this conversation, that's fine. There are other people who might be interested in it, which is wonderful.
Yeah.
But we also know there are people who, before they have watched the first frame of this, have already written a diatribe of what two pieces of shit you and I are.
Absolutely.
Do you know what I mean? Yeah. And their righteousness, their self-righteousness comes from those flashing images. And I think we need to turn off all those lights. And I don't mean that we got to remove rights. So again, if somebody wants to be trans, let them be trans. No problem at all. But don't fucking bring it into my kid's school. What are you doing bringing it into my kid's school? What the fuck has my children got to do with your fucking fetish?
Yeah.
So you got all that. Get rid of all of those, and you got to change the education system. The education system as it stands is cancerous.
Absolutely.
Universities are cancerous. They're indoctrination fucking camps is all they are. And the damage they're doing to these young minds, these beautiful, fragile, open young minds is devastating.
But does that fall back upon parents, right? And I always go back to that because if you're doing your job well as a parent, the indoctrination can be there, but your child won't stray too far off the right path.
So when your daughter comes home from her second year in college with blue hair and says, "Daddy, you're a racist,"
well, we'll have a serious conversation about that.
Yeah.
And you know what? One thing I say to people is I would have done a better job leading up to those moments that we don't arrive at that. And the reason I can say that, right, my parents, for example, were very hands-on with our education. Yeah. Incredibly involved. My younger brother, when he started going to school, my younger brother is 20 years of age now. But the days that all that LGBTQ stuff was going on and it's Pride Day in school, he didn't go to school. Yeah. And my mother intentionally said he's not going to school. And she let the teachers know, my child will not be entering school to be taught that because it's not in our culture, it's against our culture. Yeah. And we have conversations at home also. A lot of parents are distant. That's one thing I've also noticed. For the kids that go astray, parents are distant. And you're giving children too much freedom. It's your child. It's not the state's child. It's not the child of the world. It's not social media's child. It is your child. The ideology and things that are taught to your child, you have to stand up for that. And the parents that do that, their children turn out well. There's a lot of young men. But there's a lot of young men, Terry, that you'd speak to, and they would tell you, my parents were against that belief. I've spoken to a lot of young men that messaged me in their early 20s. I got invited to a university, like a frat house essentially, by a group of about 10, 15 young men in college between the age of 20 to 25 max. And they sat down and we had conversations for an hour. They were asking me different questions. And I was blown away that there's young people that are collectively thinking in the right direction. But it is that, the impact a parent has, the conversations you have with your children. And why I speak about motivation a lot on my platforms, because my father told me something pivotal. You can only give to a man something that you have yourself. You can only give to your children something you have to yourself. And I think as a man, you have to make the most of yourself in terms of being smart, right, educated, aware of what's going on, being disciplined, being strong. I think physically and mentally is important. And be a leader. So your children can see leader and they can look up to you as a hero. And everything you tell your child, they will follow. It is your child, you have to raise them. And at that point, if my child comes to me and says that, I have failed as a parent. Why have we got to that point that then I can say, oh, the world took my child away from me, the world indoctrinated my child? No, I failed as a parent. And it's about personal responsibility. We have a lot more power than we are giving away, right, by relying on all of these external sources to do all of that. It's our job. I talk with my children, they're little kids, but we have conversations. And they understand. People underestimate the power of a young child's mind. My nephew, likewise, if you sat down and spoke with him, the kid is incredibly disciplined. But that's not by force. It's by conversation, sitting down, explaining things to him. He's 12 years of age. If you sat down with him and you offered him pizza, he'd say no. If you offered him sweets, I could not be in the room. I offer him sweets at times and he says, no, I can't. Why? Because he has a goal, he has things that he's working towards, and he knows physically eating is going to take away his performance in the things that he does. But that's a consequence of conversations. What do you want to achieve in life? How do you want to be? And then we have conversation. These are the things you avoid in life. These are the things that are not good for you. They will impact you in a negative way. Those conversations need to happen more, right? And I think prevention is always better than a cure. And it's the same when it comes to your children. Many parents are sitting back and accepting it. Your child will come home and tell you, it's Pride Day in school tomorrow. Yeah, no problem, go in. Just don't buy into all of that. That's the basic conversation. No, you're not going into school. And I'll call the school and say, don't be teaching my child those type of things. It's simple. A lot of parents have personal power. Why are parents not protesting outside the schools? If that's not what you want indoctrinating your child, go protest outside the school. Talk to all the other parents. I know some of the parents might be fearful, but this is what people got to understand. And I understand it from my perspective. A lot of people were fearful for me, right, about the things that I'm doing. When I went to the City West protest, my uncle called me and he said, are you okay? I said, what do you mean? He's like, yeah, are you okay? Do you want me to send somebody to come get you? I said, I'm fine. No one's attacked me here. I'm fine. The fear is not real, right? And I love the word fear, false evidence appearing real. And that's what the media is using. I said, there's nothing to be afraid of. And after I went, other black people started saying, you know what, next time you're going, I'll come with you. I had members of the Muslim community come out and they said, we would have loved to actually come with you so we can show people that as Muslims, we also care about this country and we're not happy with the things that are going on. We don't stand for rape and abuse of children, but they need to see somebody take those steps. And that's what other people, as you mentioned, that are laying in bed, can't sleep, but the spine is growing, need to do. Take the action, take the initiative, go out and be bold, go out and speak. And that's what I encourage to people. So what they label you as racist, you know you're not. Speak your truth. The more you do it, the more other people will do it. This is how you inspire change in other people. How did the farmers do it? I'm sure there were other farmers that were afraid. I seen young farmers there, you can only see the fear in their eyes. Right? You can only see the uncertainty in their eyes. But the fact that they see other people there standing up for what's right, yeah, I'll stand alongside them. Leadership begins at an individual level, and then it grows collectively. The media is trying to lie to people, and they've done an effective job of weakening people to think that you need somebody else to be the leader, when every individual can be that. And so I think that's where we take back the personal power. I know we're coming to the final moments of our conversation, a very powerful conversation, Terry. An absolute pleasure.
Your 12-year-old nephew who doesn't eat lollipops and pizza is a fucking weirdo.
But is there any closing remarks that you want to leave with our audience with regards to the nature of the conversation we've had, or anything at all?
We have one miraculous life.
Yeah.
One. What's the point in allowing fear to determine everything? And if you're going to be misunderstood, you're going to be misinterpreted, you're going to be misrepresented maliciously, sometimes by people you love.
Yeah.
But if you're driven by a desire, a genuine loving desire for a better future for all the good people, we've got to remember there are some fucking bad bastards out there.
Absolutely.
And naively rejecting that, hating somebody for the color of their skin is disgusting. But blindly loving them for the color of their skin is equally fucking stupid, if not more so. If we are genuinely driven by love with a desire, a curiosity. Kindness, curiosity, and courage, to me, are the three most elemental aspects of any character. If you're driven by the three of those, you can't go too far wrong, because you'll meet incredible people. And if you're driven by fear and cowardice, you'll meet cowards that you should fear.
Brilliant. And what a powerful way to conclude that. As we conclude our broadcast for today, where can people connect with you? Where can people reach you? Where can people find you and follow some of your messaging? And
I gave up social media. I'm on Facebook. The page is open, but I've stopped posting there.
Yeah.
But again, I'm easy to type my name into YouTube and stuff there.
Fantastic. Terry, it's been an absolute pleasure.
Pleasure.
Thank you for your
genuine
time.
pleasure.
Thank you.